I have always believed that life is nothing but a long chain of ordinary days. And yet, sometimes, one unexpected moment changes everything forever. I was never the kind of girl who dreamed about fairy tales or pictured a prince arriving on a white horse. My life was simple. Wake up early, go to work, spend evenings helping my mother in the kitchen, and then read a book before bed. Love, to me, was something distant, something that belonged to movies or novels, not to the quiet corners of my own existence. Yet destiny has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, and that is exactly what happened to me. It was an ordinary Monday morning when I met him, though at the time, I had no idea that this encounter would plant the first seed of a story that would shape my heart. I remember stepping into the library, the faint smell of old pages welcoming me, and there he was, standing by the history section, flipping through a heavy book as though he had all the time in the world. His presence was calm, almost unshakable, and I felt something stir inside me that I couldn't quite name. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just a passing glance. But when our eyes met for the first time, I felt as though the air between us carried a hidden message, one only we could understand. I lowered my gaze quickly, embarrassed at my own imagination. Yet my heart refused to stay quiet. That was the first moment, the silent beginning of a love story I never knew I was destined to live. For the next few weeks, I found myself going to the library more often than I actually needed to. At first, I convinced myself that it was just for the sake of reading. But deep inside, I knew there was another reason. Somehow, he was always there, sitting in the same corner, either lost in a book or scribbling notes in a small leather diary he carried everywhere. I noticed little details about him without meaning to. How he tucked a strand of hair behind his ear when he concentrated, how he tapped his fingers lightly on the table when he was thinking, and how his lips curved into a faint smile whenever he came across something that amused him. I never dared to speak to him, though the thought lingered on my lips each time. It was as if an invisible wall stood between us, a barrier made of hesitation and fear. One day, fate gave me the courage I lacked. I was reaching for a book placed high on the shelf, and it slipped from my grasp, tumbling to the floor with a loud thud. Startled, I bent down to pick it up. But before I could, another hand reached out, brushing against mine. I looked up, and there he was, offering the book to me with the gentlest smile I had ever seen. "Careful," he said softly, his voice calm yet warm. "These books can be heavier than they look." That one sentence was enough to make my heart race faster than ever before. I thanked him, trying to hide the trembling in my hands, and he nodded before returning to his seat. It was a small exchange, just a few seconds, but it felt like the door to something new had quietly opened in my life, and I couldn't stop wondering where it might lead. After that brief exchange, something inside me changed. I was no longer content with simply watching him from a distance. I began to crave conversation, even if it was just a few words. The next time I saw him, he was seated at his usual spot with his diary open, scribbling quickly, as though afraid the thoughts in his mind might escape if not captured at once. Gathering every ounce of courage, I walked toward him and asked softly, "Do you mind if I sit here?" He looked up, surprised at first, then smiled and gestured to the empty chair beside him. My heart leaped at his silent invitation. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both pretending to be busy with our books. But the tension was thick, almost sweet. Finally, I asked what he was writing, and to my surprise, he turned the diary around to show me. It was filled with poems, raw, unpolished, yet filled with emotion so deep that I found myself reading them twice, just to absorb their meaning. "They're not very good," he said modestly, though I thought they were beautiful. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just someone who read books. He was someone who carried entire worlds inside his heart. Slowly, our conversations grew longer. We talked about literature, about life, about the little things that seemed ordinary but mattered more than we admitted. He told me about his dream of becoming a writer, and I shared my secret love for sketching, something I rarely revealed to anyone. We began meeting more often, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by chance, and each meeting stitched a new thread into the fabric of our connection. I could feel myself falling deeper and deeper, though I didn't yet dare to name it as love. But in the quiet glances, the shared laughter, and the way my world seemed brighter in his presence, I knew something was already blooming inside me, something I could no longer ignore. It did not take long for our meetings to become the highlight of my days. Every time I stepped into the library, my eyes instinctively searched for him, and the moment I found him, everything else faded into the background. What amazed me most was how easy it felt to be with him. I had always been a shy, reserved woman, cautious with my words and guarded with my heart. But around him, I felt lighter, as though I could breathe more freely. He had a way of listening, not just with his ears, but with his whole presence, making me feel that my thoughts, no matter how small, were worth hearing. One evening, after hours of reading together, he suggested we take a walk outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time, I felt the gentle brush of his hand against mine as we walked side by side. It was such a simple gesture, yet it sent waves of warmth through me, as if the world had quietly acknowledged our unspoken bond. We did not talk much during that walk. Instead, silence itself seemed to carry our feelings. When we finally parted ways, he paused for a moment, looking as though he wanted to say something but couldn't. I, too, felt words caught in my throat, but I smiled and whispered goodnight. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the walk in my mind. The fading light, the touch of his hand, the way his eyes softened when they met mine. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that this was no longer a simple friendship. What I felt for him was real, undeniable, and perhaps even frightening in its intensity. Yet, despite the fear of what the future might hold, I found myself longing for more conversations, more laughter, more moments that belonged only to us. It was love, tender and fragile, quietly taking root in the soil of our everyday lives. But love, as I soon discovered, is never as simple as holding hands beneath a painted sky. Life has a way of testing the strength of feelings, and ours was no exception. He had dreams of moving to another city, a larger place where opportunities for writers were greater, while my life was deeply rooted here. Bound by family responsibilities I could not abandon. The thought of distance frightened me more than I cared to admit. I tried to ignore it at first, convincing myself that the future would somehow work itself out. But the fear lingered like a shadow over our happiest moments. One evening while sitting together in the library, he finally spoke of it. I might leave soon, he said quietly, almost apologetically, as if he already knew how much those words would wound me. My heart sank, though I forced myself to stay calm. I asked him when, and he shrugged, explaining that nothing was certain yet, but the possibility was strong. The rest of the evening passed in uneasy silence, both of us pretending to read while our thoughts drifted elsewhere. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, torn between the joy of what we had and the fear of losing it. And yet, even in the midst of my sorrow, I realized something important. Love was not meant to be easy, but it was meant to be real. I told myself that if what we shared was true, then no distance could erase it. The following day, I looked into his eyes with newfound determination and whispered, "If you go, I will wait, no matter how long it takes." He held my hand, his grip firm yet trembling, and for the first time, I saw tears shining in his eyes. That moment became a promise, unspoken yet powerful, binding our hearts in ways neither time nor distance could easily undo. Time moved forward, as it always does, carrying with it both joy and sorrow, hope and uncertainty. He eventually left for the city, chasing the dream he had always carried within him, while I stayed behind, bound by duty and love for my family. The first weeks without him felt unbearable. The silence of the library was louder than any noise, and the empty chair beside me a constant reminder of what I had lost. Yet, his words and his presence never truly left me. Letters arrived, sometimes late, sometimes unexpectedly, filled with his poems and thoughts, with promises that distance could not weaken what was real between us. I wrote back, pouring my heart into every page, sketching little drawings in the margins as if to leave a piece of myself with him. There were days when doubt consumed me, when I wondered if our love could withstand the cruel test of time. But then I remembered the warmth of his hand in mine, the sincerity in his eyes, and I chose faith over fear. Years have passed since that first encounter in the library, and though our journey has not been easy, I carry no regrets. Love taught me patience. It taught me courage, and above all, it taught me that the simplest moments, an exchange of smiles, a shared silence, a gentle touch can hold the deepest meaning. Today, as I sit by the window, his latest letter resting in my lap, I smile softly to myself. Our story is still being written, one day at a time, across miles and years. And though the ending remains unknown, I know with certainty that what we share is eternal in its own quiet way. And so, this is my love story, not perfect, not free of struggle, but beautifully mine. A tale of two souls who found each other in the stillness of a library and chose to hold on, no matter where life may lead.